Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome to the first of the Sunday afternoon talks for 2019. As people are probably aware, this is a feature of summertime at Amaravati since about 1985 or 86. I think Mposameto started these. So I'm very happy to carry on this tradition. And the theme for this first talk this year is navigating skillfully the rocky waters of conflict. So my guess is that most of us here have had experience of conflict of some kind or another. I would ask for a show of hands of anyone who's never had any conflict in their life. So this is a common experience for all of us. So I thought this was a good place to begin the reflections for this year. I don't come up with these titles myself. I invite the nuns and the monks to produce a number of themes. So we have about 4 or 5 pages of suggestions, and then I kind of pick through and select a variety of topics from that list. But this one I thought would be a good place to begin, since it's such a common human experience. In reflecting on this area, the first thing that came to mind was, we speak of conflict in terms of conflicting with other people, or conflicting with life outside us, but a lot of the experience of conflict is within ourselves, and so that's in a way a whole other topic, inner conflict. But I'll try to stick to the theme of conflicting with those outside of ourselves, first of all, but there's the opportunity for questions and discussion later on, so that inner conflict it's not a forbidden topic, but there's enough to say about conflicting with other people to begin with. Secondly, one of the things, reflecting on this theme, that first of all you start off by assuming that conflict is a bad thing, or people don't want conflict. You know, most of us are Buddhists or interested in Buddhist practice, and so we think, well, I don't want any conflict in my life. But my experience of living in the world is that some people really like conflict, and that actually there's this urge to look for an argument, look for something to complain about or to criticize or get upset about, and for some people it's how they feel alive, is to find fault with things, to complain about the people around them, this is wrong and this is wrong and this shouldn't be this way and that shouldn't be that way, and he's wrong and she's wrong and he's really wrong. And so, even though it's not saying that there are not things worthy of criticism, but it can be an invisible, motivation that to oneself, that actually it's more getting a feeling of being alive by complaining, criticizing, conflicting, looking for an argument, so you'll feel like somebody, so that you'll feel alive. So, if you're now thinking, how did he know? It's not psychic powers. It's just the law of averages, that sometimes we are like that, and so I feel it's good to consider that if your mind is inclined towards conflict and argument and complaining, criticizing, to consider, and how much of that comes from me needing the feeling of being alive. Am I looking for an argument? Am I looking for conflict as something that gives me energy, gives me a charge? So that's one aspect of conflict, but I'll assume that most of us don't want conflict, either consciously or unconsciously. So most of what I'll talk about is how to understand that sense of conflict or argument and disagreement between ourselves and others, and how to bring about resolution for that. Again, I don't have psychic powers. I can't look into people's lives, but I can assume that most of us have had conflict either with our siblings, our brothers and sisters, with our parents, our children, feeling slighted. Spouses, ex-spouses are particularly good territory for feeling conflict and grief. The one that you walked down the aisle with is the one that you feel most difficult to have loving kindness for. Again, I'm not reading anybody's mind. If you think, how did he know? It's like, again, this is just statistics. It's not anything miraculous. But that's often love and hate are very, very closely related, and so that, or our ajahns, the ajahn who sort of betrayed you or felt he's sort of done you wrong or mistreated you, or used to be so inspiring, and now he didn't give me what I wanted, so now he's really bad and awful, and I reject him, and he should be. I thought he was wise and kind. Why didn't he give me what I wanted? Why did he tell me to drop that bad habit? And so forth, so that it's a human experience, whether we're living in a monastery, outside the monastery, whether we have a marriage or no marriage, whether we have siblings, or certainly in the world we live amongst the human family, and we find this sense of friction, or say argument, difficulty, conflict between ourselves and others. And so it's important to understand where does this come from, how does this work, and how can it be brought to an end. One of the most famous teachings of the Buddha from the Dhammapada is the verse that says, hatred is never conquered by hatred, hatred is only ever conquered by love. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. So that that is very, very clear, and it's stated over and over again in the Buddha's teachings, how more hatred or the feelings of wanting revenge, not wanting to forgive, those are they're painful to the person that's receiving those negative feelings, but also they're painful for ourselves. It's a punishment for ourselves as well to carry around that kind of grudge, that kind of anger and aversion. It's making our own life miserable. So the Buddha pointed out, this isn't the way to resolve conflicts or difficulties. More hatred is not going to help. Revenge is not going to really help. So that when we look at this area of conflict, the rocky waters of conflict, it's important to consider, well, where does this come from, and how does our mind relate to that? How do we deal with those feelings of disappointment or resentment? Our feelings have been hurt. Our hopes have been disappointed or rejected. Our feelings have been overridden. Our particular perspective or our wishes have been overridden by somebody else. Well, in reflecting on this, I feel one of the core issues is our attachment to views and opinions, our own judgments. When we think something, we assume that it's true. So if I say that person is wrong, they shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have said that. He was really unkind when he did that. Whatever it might be in our life, our parents, our children, our ajahn, our spouse, our partner, the teachers, or whoever it might be, our boss at work, a very convenient object for aversion, our boss and our managers. So that sense of, if I think it must be true, is a principle that is, I feel, very worthy of examining and challenging. And it's something I talk about a lot because it's so strong in our society. We're trained, our education is around attachment to thought. You're trained to have clear, logical, meaningful thought and to defend it, to argue your point, to debate. The school I went to had a debating society, and it was like a afternoon's entertainment, was having an argument, trying to prove that you're right. So that our society, it worships thought, and there's that unconscious assumption that most of us have, that if I think something, it's true. If I say, this is delicious, then we assume that's a true statement. If somebody else thinks differently, then we assume that they're wrong, or they haven't got good taste like we have. We say that's an ugly color, and if someone thinks it's beautiful, then they're obviously deluded. This is obviously somewhat sweeping statements, but I think you can get the impression that, and if we look at our own minds, it's very, very easy for us to assume that. If I think it, it's true. And so we believe the judgments that our mind makes, and the opinions that we have. This person, they should be this way, they shouldn't be that way, and we don't challenge that. We don't look at that just as a passing impression, but we take it to be absolutely true. So I see this as one of the major roots of conflict, is that sense of taking our opinion, our point of view, and assuming it's an absolute reality. The way that the mind then takes hold of that, so maybe the first of the ways of navigating these rocky waters is to look at that area of thought and opinion and how we judge each other. We say, oh, this person's good, that person's bad. And then we create that person, we create ourselves as a reliable judge. We create that other person as someone who's good, someone who's bad, someone we admire, someone that we criticize, and so forth. And we assume those value judgments are true and real. And we also don't notice how with thought we are creating each other. We create each other. This is my mother. This is my father. This is these are my monks. These are my nuns. These are this is my lay community. This is, say, a creation of the mind, but we don't see it as that. We just take it that kind of labeling and that way that we create each other. I can say, I am the Ajahn. I'm doing the talking. You're the audience. You're listening. So I can create you as that. That's the only role that you have in the universe at the moment, is being the Sunday afternoon Dhamma Talk audience. But it's not true. It's just one tiny little piece of what you are. And me being in the role of teaching is also just one tiny little piece of what I am. But yet we can grasp those roles and judge each other in those terms. So the first of the ways of navigating those rocky waters is to not believe our thoughts so much, to challenge our thoughts. And one of the helpful reflections that I like to encourage is to take the simple phrase, you put this on your fridge, or write it over your bathroom mirror, or put it up on the wall, embroider it, and say, just because I think it, it doesn't mean it's true. Offer that for reflection. just because you think it, just because I think it, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means it's a thought passing through the mind. I mean, I can say today is Sunday, which is true here in England. In New Zealand, it's already Monday. They're 12 hours ahead. So it's 2:15 in the morning in New Zealand. So is it Sunday or is it Monday? So a very simple way of bringing that to our attention, to reflect on that, and to say, well, yeah, this is just one particular perspective. Or if I say, which direction is my finger pointing, to the left or to the right? Again, to me, it's obvious it's pointing to the left. From where you're sitting, it's like, no, Ajahn, it's pointing to the right. And Tantana and Anagarika Max is pointing right at them. It's not pointing left or right, it's pointing at me. So, where is my finger pointing? It depends on where we sit, doesn't it? So one of the stories that Luang Por Sumedho told many times, and I feel is a very, a perfect illustration of this issue, is how the mind attaches to its own opinions and its own views and its own rightness. I brought along a copy of this little booklet called I'm Right, You're Wrong, which is kind of on the same theme as today's talk. It's about loving kindness, but the title of the book is I'm Right, You're Wrong, seeing that that's one of the major obstructions to kindness is this habit of attaching to thought. So in this little book, and I'll recount it today, there's a story that Luang Por Sumedho would tell of when he was a young monk, and in his monastery, Wat Bapong, where he was training with Ajahn Chah, there was a very eccentric monk, a Thai monk, and he was unusually loud, very outspoken. His voice was quite strong. He would use quite coarse language. And he was a very different character to most of the other monks living in the monastery. And generally speaking, in Thailand, people are not very confrontational. They tend to be quite quiet and polite and say socially very graceful. And he was kind of the opposite. He was very loud, very confrontational, very noisy, and so it was very noticeable that this monk was upsetting. The way he operated was upsetting to the other monks in the community. The lay people who came were sort of shocked and a bit put off by him. And the young Ajahn Sumedho couldn't understand why Ajahn Chah just sort of, quote unquote, let this monk get away with it. Why doesn't he say something? He's just so noisy, so loud, so coarse. And his language is really awful. Surely Luang Por should say something or put him, set him straight. And he was there for quite some time, and the young Ajahn Sumedho couldn't understand why Ajahn Chah wasn't doing something to fix this monk or correct him. Because Wat Bapong was famous for being a very strict and orderly, very impressive in the quality of training and restraint of the nuns and monks who lived there. So anyway, what happened was that Ajahn Chah went away to visit some branch monasteries for a few weeks, and during that time they had the meeting of the regular fortnightly meeting of the Sangha. And at the end of that, where we recite our rules, the senior monk will say, has anyone got any business they want to discuss with the community? And the young Ajahn Sumedho said, yes, actually, I have something I'd like to bring up. And so he sort of waited till Ajahn Chah was away, because he was sort of kind of choosing his moment, as it were. And so then he brought up the behavior of this very loud-mouthed monk. And as quite a loud-mouthed person myself, I can empathize. Talkative, loud character myself, there's a certain connection I feel. Anyway, so he brought it up, and also during that sort of criticism, he sort of named the occasions when certain people were upset, or things that he said, and quoted the time and the day kind of accurately, and who was there accurately, and what was said, it was quoted accurately. So he had all his facts straight. He had all his information was correct. But during this time, the monk who was being criticized was looking at the floor, predictably. And so, as I said, in Thailand, and many Thai people here will know, it's a non-confrontational culture. People don't tend to face off with each other. You tend to pass your criticisms along through the side door and make things known in a kind of quiet and more subtle way. Anyway, at the end of the meeting, the senior monk, Ajahn Liam, was the second monk of Wat Bapong, so he was looking after it. He said, well, thank you, Tan Sumedho, for sharing that. We've heard what you have to say, and duly noted. So then he felt that maybe some of the other monks were going to come up to him and say, well done, Sumedho, you really let him have it, it's long overdue. But people were strangely quiet. And then within a day or so, that the loudmouth monk had left and or disappeared, and sort of took leave and vanished from Wat Bapong. So a couple of weeks later, when Luang Por Chah came back, and word reached him very quickly about this encounter, and he waited for the right moment and invited the young Ajahn Sumedho to come and have a chat with him. And he said, Sumedho, I heard what you had to say about our loudmouthed friend at the Patimokkha recitation. And yeah, it's true, he was loud. Do you think I hadn't noticed that? Do you think I was unaware? Did you think I couldn't recognize that he was out of order? But also, did you consider that he's been chucked out of every other monastery he's ever lived in? And Wat Bapong, this was the last place he could stay, because I was ready to make a space for him. He said, his mouth is evil, but his heart is good. Bak bak, der jai di. His mouth is evil, but his heart is good. He said, but now you shut the door on him. He can't come back here. You shamed him publicly, so he can't come back here, because of the way that you spoke. So you have to accept that. He said, you were right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. So that's really the principle that I wanted to put across today. Tuk nai kwam ching, pit nai tam. Or words to that effect. That's probably not the perfect Thai, but it's like you are right in fact, your facts were correct, but you are wrong in terms of Dhamma. So that's very important in terms of conflict and working with our minds, our thoughts, and our attitudes, our judgments. Even if we got all our facts correct, yeah, she did say that, and that was really out of order. Or he shouldn't have done this, and he really was unkind when he said that. But that is, say, the information is one thing, but the way we put it across, the way that the attitude we have in our heart when we speak, that's something else altogether. So when we are in a state of conflict and we want to resolve that, it's not just a matter of having facts on your side. It's not just a matter of being, say, righteous, as we would say in English. That it's also the assessment, weighing up the time, the place, the situation. Okay, I want to give this feedback. I feel this person needs to receive this feedback. What's a good time to say it? What's the right way to say it? What's my intention in saying it? Do I just want to punish that person for disappointing me or upsetting me? Or do I actually want to speak in order to help them to see how they've been harming themselves, as well as upsetting other people? What's in my heart? So that that way of say, taking a second look at our own judgments and seeing how we are typecasting each other, our wife, our husband, our Ajahn, our fellow nuns or monks, the people on our street, the next door neighbor, our boss, our staff. We typecast people. You say, this is the boss. He's like this, or my wife, she's like this, or my husband, he's like that. And we make those judgments, and we take them to be absolutely true. If we just take a step back and say, well, that's just one part of it. That's one perspective. Or my experience was on seeing that or hearing that was feeling upset or feeling annoyed. But is that the whole story? And even if I have these feelings, what's the best way to convey that, to speak on that, to bring that to the other person's attention? So then we can be not only right in fact, but also right in terms of Dhamma. We are, say, attuning to the whole being that we're relating to, rather than just our image of them. We don't create ourselves as a particular personality. We don't create the other. But rather we're guided by mindfulness and wisdom, that the heart is attuned to the time, the place, and the situation in a skillful way. So another of the aspects of dealing with conflict is the emotion that we feel. So feeling angry, or feeling vengeful, or feeling hurt, and that when there's an emotion in the heart, then it seems very real, very, very solid and substantial, right? When we're angry, then it seems that that person is to blame, and they're wrong and they're bad. Or if our feelings are hurt, we're upset because of what someone has said or done to us, then that pain feels very, very real, and we feel alienated, separate, and in conflict with that other person. So the attention goes to the other, that person, my boss, who's treated me really badly, my Ajahn, who's just said something really annoying. He really shouldn't say that. It's really let me down. Or my child or my parent. And the attention, the stronger the emotion, the more the attention goes to the other. And so one of the incredibly helpful teachings or areas of teaching that Lumpur Sumedho focused on in the early days of Amaravati, through the late 80s, early 90s, he taught a lot about mindfulness of emotion. So if you're feeling angry, so rather than just focusing on the person or the thing that you're angry with, look at that feeling of anger, get to know that the emotion of anger, don't take it personally, but look at that as an experience within your heart, within your mind. And that takes quite a lot of effort, because the attention goes to what he did that is annoying, or how she is that's really upsetting. And so to turn the attention around and say, well, how does anger feel in the heart? How's this feeling of loss or separation or grief? How does this feel in the heart? And I found that was extraordinarily helpful. And there's a couple of approaches to that. Firstly, just naming what the emotion is when we're feeling it. Like, this is the feeling of jealousy, like the sort of, well, what about me? I want one too. That's not fair. To be able to catch that, and even if you have been treated unfairly, it's not as though the other people are always innocent. You know, it might be that someone is being unkind to you. They do deliberately want to upset you. It can be. They're usually not in monasteries. It's not. Generally, the more kind of noble-hearted people come and live in these places, but not always, but usually. But it doesn't mean to say that feeling has no basis, but rather this is the feeling of being left out. You know, maybe you have been left out, but to take the attention and put the attention, turn it around, take it and direct it inwards to say, this is the feeling of me being left out. This is the "what about me" feeling. That's what this is. Or this is the "how dare you," the angry, resentful feeling. This is the angry, resentful feeling. It's like this. And I found that extraordinarily helpful. Because you're not, and over again, Luang Por Sumedho would emphasize, you don't free the heart from its suffering by suppressing emotion. The Buddhist path is not about suppressing or having no emotions, but rather it's through understanding emotions. So sometimes when we read Buddhist literature or we hear Dhamma talks, it can come across that if you're practicing really well, if you're a really good Buddhist, you'll have no emotions at all. You kind of just be a sort of data reception unit, like one of these video cameras, just sort of collecting data, seeing, hearing, feeling, resenting, loving, hating. But it's not. It's and those of you who've been around Luang Por Sumedho will know he's very, very clear on this, and I found this was extremely helpful. We're not trying to get beyond suffering by having no emotions, no pain, no love, no hate, no fear, but through knowing them, through understanding them, and learning how not to take them personally. So it sounds remarkably simple, but just by naming what's present, this is the feeling of resentment. It's like this. And again, being around Luang Por Sumedho, how many times have we heard him say, "It's like this," or "This is the way it is. It's this way. It's exactly this way." One, we might remember it in one particular way, but he would, over and over again, he'd use this kind of language to bring the attention to that. So naming what the emotion is, without criticizing it, without saying it shouldn't be there, or that we want it to be over, but just naming exactly what is present is a very helpful and powerful tool. So another method of navigating then these the tricky rocks, it's the ones just under the surface that are most dangerous, is the physical sensation that goes with anger or conflict. If you have that sense of a grudge or a conflict, again, the attention will go to that person. What he said, or how she talked to me, and she shouldn't be like this, and how dare she? That's really unfair. So to let go of the person, let go of the story, the narrative, whether it should be there, shouldn't be there, and just feel, what is that grudging like in your body? Where is anger felt? Where is that sense of division or resentment? And we're all different, so we can experience these things in different ways. We can have a kind of cold fury, like just gritting our teeth, kind of going rigid and icy. We can feel very agitated, very hot, or like a steel bar across your shoulders. It can be all kinds of things. But that emotion, however it takes shape when there's conflict in the family, in the workplace, or wherever, there's a physical sensation that goes with it. And just bringing the attention to the physical feeling that goes with that emotion, often it's quite shocking, like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. Why do I want to do this to myself? And it's not like, this is really stupid, I should stop it, as a kind of mental command, but just, it's like suddenly noticing that you're carrying 5 suitcases. Oh, this is really heavy, this is really hard work. Yeah, why didn't I notice this before? And so then the natural response is to put things down and at least have a bit of a breather. So in working with conflict and navigating conflict, and especially if you're in the middle of an argument with your beloved, or you're, say, listening to a Dhamma talk and the Ajahn is saying something that you don't agree with, or is confusing, or like, what's she talking about? Or like, oh, he's telling that story again. How many times have I heard that? But to bring the attention inwards and say, what does this feel like? This resentment or grudging, or this agitated feeling of being in the middle of a spat, a conflict. How does it feel? Where is it? Is it in your shoulders, in your face, in your hands, in your belly? Where is it? What does it feel like? And then it's, again, this is the kind of thing that Luang Por Sumedho would focus on. And it's really startling how strong the physical sensations are, often with states of conflict. And simply by being aware of them, the presence of that awareness, that the impact of the awareness, that it's like shining a light on a tight, shining a heat lamp on a tight muscle. It's like the muscle starts relaxing. You can't sustain that kind of stressing and tension if you're aware of it. Like if you notice you're carrying 5 suitcases, it's like you make the effort to put them down because it's so burdensome, it's so uncomfortable and awkward, difficult. So with these different approaches, so then with the quality of the emotional side of it, then another aspect of dealing with conflict is like social engagement. When you recognize you're arguing with someone again, or you're grumbling about your boss, or you're carrying the Ajahn around and got this long list of things that are wrong with him or her, and or that or the Ajahn is carrying around one of the junior people, all the things that are wrong with them, and that sense of the mind, say, carrying around that negativity, then it doesn't just have to be resolved internally. And one of the practices that we have in our tradition is that of asking for forgiveness, and this is something that's mentioned a number of times in Dhamma talks. And I feel it's, even though it's a part of a monastic tradition or a custom from Asia, it's something that we can bring into our own homes, and we can use that between ourselves and our family, or in the workplace, or wherever we might be, that we can ask for forgiveness. If we realize we've been carrying around a grudge, carrying around a lot of negativity and aversion, the mind, say, filled with a kind of hatred and criticism, an absence of metta, then to recognize that and to acknowledge that within ourselves, and to see that, we don't just have to be passive or deal with that internally. We can actually approach the other person and acknowledge that. Say, I'm terribly sorry. I've been carrying you around for the last 2.5 years. You might not have noticed that, but you've been part of my luggage. And it's important when we do recognize that and we see the unskillful quality of it, that we all make mistakes. That we lose our way. We get distracted by feelings of aversion, by feelings of desire or greed or selfishness, feelings of jealousy. Again, many of you who've listened to Luang Por Sumedho's Dhamma talks over the years, you'll notice he talks a lot about anger and he talks a lot about jealousy. And those are strong emotions that he would be experiencing. He would like to not experience them, but they're major parts of his character. And I feel it's also part of the strength of the forest tradition and the way that we teach, is that we use our own shortcomings as a material for giving instruction. So I think that recognition that we make mistakes, we miss our shot, and that we find ourselves carrying around resentment, we make judgments about others, or others have aversion towards us through something that we have done, and that it's a kind of strength within us to recognize, I didn't speak well there. That was I wasn't being thoughtful. The way I acted, that was selfish. That was cruel. I was being lazy or being egotistical. That's right. My actions were worthy of criticism. That person is angry with me, and there's conflict between us because I didn't do very well. I didn't speak well. I didn't act well. I could have done better. So that kind of acknowledgement, the Buddha said, to recognize our mistakes as such, to see our transgressions as such, and to acknowledge them, and then to endeavor to do better in the future. This is called development in this Dhamma and discipline, in this teaching. So that's not a weakness to be wrong, to have made mistakes, or to have carried around a grudge. It's in a way, it's a part of the human condition that we do that. We all make mistakes. Even the Buddha. If any of you who've studied the monastic discipline that nuns and monks certainly have done, you'll see that there's many of our rules. The Buddha established them, then he had to change them because he didn't take account of every aspect of the situation. So he had to keep several rules he amended many times over. I think the record is one that was amended about 7 or 8 times. Because of the Buddha not thinking things through. He would establish a rule, and then people would misuse it. He said, "Okay, well, don't do that. Do it this way instead." And or his own actions, like say, for example, when he went back to Kapilavatthu, and his former wife, Princess Yashodhara, sent his son, the 7-year-old Rahula, to go and pay respects to his father, the Buddha. And then his mother, Princess Yashodhara, said, "Go and ask your father for your inheritance." It's not sure exactly what was on her mind when she said that, or what was behind that exchange. But that's what she said. She said to Rahula, "Go and ask your father for your inheritance." And so the Rahula said, "My mother says I'm to ask you for my inheritance." And so the Buddha had been the crown prince and had left the household life and gone off to be a monk when he came back. And so he thought, well, I am of the lineage of the Buddhas, and so I've undertaken the monastic life. My son is asking for his inheritance, so I'll give him the precepts of a novice. So he ordained him as the first samanera, the first novice monk. So some people find some difficulty with that. Think, well, is that really what he meant, or was that really fair? Or I know he was a fully enlightened Buddha, and so he had his own pure-hearted reasons. But was that done wisely or correctly or thoughtfully? Anyway, his father did not think so. So King Suddhodana took great exception to that, to the Buddha, saying, "Well, my son is asking for his inheritance. I am of the lineage of the Buddhas. I'm a monk, so he wants his inheritance from me. So the inheritance is the robe and the monastic life." So Rahula became the first novice, and later he became a fully enlightened being as well, an arahant. But at that time, the Buddha's father, King Suddhodana, was very upset, and so he went to the Buddha, and he said. Even though the Buddha was Rahula's father and King Suddhodana was the grandfather, he had become very attached to the boy, and so he criticized the Buddha and said, "Love for our children cuts through the skin and reaches the flesh. It cuts through the flesh and reaches the bone. It cuts through the bone and reaches the marrow, and having reached the marrow, it lodges there. It is inappropriate for you to for a young child to be given the precepts without the permission of their parents, even though the Buddha was actually his parent. His father, King Suddhodana, had sort of become his sort of parent by proxy, his adoptive parent, and so the Buddha acknowledged that. And so from that time, it was always the case that a novice has to have the permission of their parents before they take the robes, and even for the full ordination, then you have the question: do you have the permission of your mother and your father? Anunyatosi mata pituhi. Do you have the permission of your mother and your father? So that was established because the Buddha, quote unquote, made a mistake. That might sound heretical, but the Buddha acknowledged, yes, my father, the king, is correct. This has an impact on people, and so therefore let's do things differently in the future. So even a fully enlightened Buddha can recognize that their choices have a negative impact on other people, and then they can adjust their behavior. So I feel this asking for forgiveness, recognizing that we make mistakes, or we do things or say things that hurt people's feelings, that's really important. And in the ceremony that we do, we say in Pali, by body, speech or mind, any of the three doors, body, speech or mind, if there's anything that I have done, intentionally or unintentionally, that has been hurtful to you, then I ask for your forgiveness. And then the other person who's being spoken to says, I forgive you and please forgive me also. And that's it's a kind of ceremonial, a customary exchange, but it's also it's meaningful insofar as hopefully people understand the Pali, but also the meaning behind it is at that time you are acknowledging that even if you don't know it, there's things that you can have said, the things that you can have done, just things that in the way that you are, that can be upsetting or intimidating or challenging for people. In the Sangha, I remember years ago, one of the monks, my accent isn't quite so extreme now as it used to be. I lived in America for about 15 years, so my accent is a bit more mid-Atlantic rather than totally English. But I used to speak like Prince Charles, and I had a sort of English boarding school accent. And when I lived here at Amaravati in the mid-80s, early 90s, I remember one of the monks who was a Londoner, from the East End of London, came to me and said, I have to let you know that I've just been carrying around all this aversion for you because of the way you speak. It's like I just hear your voice and it just says officer class. And I'm from the East End. I'm the kind of cannon fodder end of that's in the army about the sort of poor guys in the infantry set out into the front lines to soak up the gunfire from the cannons, called cannon fodder. It's a really ugly kind of term. But the officers will be back, back at the command post, giving orders and sipping gin and tonics, and sending the working class people out to the front lines. Unfortunately, that's not too far from the reality of things as war has been fought. So he said, I hear your voice, and that's what it says to me. It's like you're one of them, even though I know you're a monk, and that it's stupid. That's the effect of your accent. And so I'm terribly sorry, but I've been carrying around this negative, aversive feeling towards you. And so I said, well, I'm frightfully sorry, I don't think I said it quite that bad. But what can you do? That's the impact that you have on others. You don't wish for it, but I appreciated him stepping up and saying that, because it just never occurred to me. It just didn't cross my mind because to me it's just talking. It's just and it wouldn't have registered in my mind that had a negative impact. But for someone who's grown up in a working class life and been oppressed and taken advantage of by the people with voices like this, then there's that negative reaction. So whether something has been done intentionally or unintentionally, whether we know about it or we don't know about it, that you can be doing things that are upsetting to people. It's a very beautiful and wholesome way of clearing the slate. So we have that ceremony of asking for forgiveness at the beginning of a retreat. So the rains retreat began after the day after the full moon last week. So we have that ceremony of asking for forgiveness to begin the retreat. So we clear the slate, so clean the whiteboard, and make everything as open and as clear between each other as possible. And then at the end of the retreat, after having lived together for 3 months, then we do the same. By body, speech, or mind, whatever I have done that's been hurtful to you in any way, shape, or form, intentionally or unintentionally, then I ask for your forgiveness. And it's interesting that if there's something that you don't want to forgive, that you're still carrying around, there's a lovely a line in the Rabbi Burns poem Tam O'Shanter, which talks about a woman waiting for her drunk husband to roll in from the pub, and it describes her, excuse my bad Scottish accent if there's any Scottish people here, nursing her wrath to keep it warm. So nursing her wrath, her anger, to keep it warm, like looking after her baby, like I'm going to keep my anger nice and warm so it won't cool down before he gets back. Gets the frying pan, in that particular story, poem of Tam O'Shanter. So the nursing her wrath to keep it warm, so that sometimes when you're carrying out that ceremony and there is some wrath that you're nursing, it comes to mind. It's like, please forgive me also because I haven't let go of this one yet. I'm still keeping this grudge. I can't quite drop it yet. And again, going back maybe to the beginning of this talk, I said sometimes people get a charge or a sense of being alive by being contrary, by kind of always opposing or criticizing or finding fault or causing, looking for conflict to make them feel alive. Sometimes we don't want to let go of our grudges. We don't want to let go of our broken heart or our how we've been mistreated by our teachers or our spouse or your old head teacher who persecuted you in your primary school, that you want to carry that person around, because what will you do if you haven't got that? Who will you be if you haven't got that sort of that lust for revenge or that hatred? So sometimes we want to keep that sense of, no, I can never forgive. I won't forgive and I won't forget, because of the sense of being it gives us. But again, the Buddha points to that, helps us to see, well, that's a weakness in us, that it's that sense of keeping a grudge going, keeping hatred going, just because of it giving us a sense of being. That's giving us continued self-torture, where we're say injuring ourselves, we're harming ourselves, we're damaging our own life, we're burdening our own heart with that. So it's understandable enough, and again, if any of you are feeling like, how did he know? Or like, oh my goodness, I do that all the time. Here's my list, the list of people that deserve vengeance. And so it's a question of recognizing that. You can't just snap your fingers and make it go away. Oh, that's a bad habit, I'll stop that. It's like, I won't get angry anymore, I'll let go of all of that. But recognizing it, seeing, I'm still carrying that person around, the one who let me down, or the one who betrayed me, the one who really hurt my feelings, and that was really unfair, and my life has been ruined, I've been scarred, damaged because of that. And perhaps there really is, not just mental scars, but physical damage. You're in a car crash by someone who was drunk, and you've been physically disabled because of someone's foolish behavior. That happens. But still, the Buddha's encouragement is that even if that you've got good reason to be resentful, to be negative, it only harms us to be carrying that around, to not to forgive. So that when we talk in this way, this is sometimes people feel, well, you can't just let people get away with it, or if you forget, that it's as if the person, they should be punished, or it shouldn't be forgotten, or shouldn't be forgiven. And so it's a good area to explore. It's like, well, yes, perhaps I can remember that, and I can see that was poorly done, and yes, that's had a negative impact on my life, or maybe something that I've done that I hate myself for, that's had a negative impact on others. But we can forgive, but not forget. We don't have to carry it around as some kind of permanent wrong, but rather we can let the memory of it, we can take the recollection or the not forgetting as an encouragement. Well, let me give my life to encouraging people to not be drunk when they're driving, or to let me give my life to encouraging people to be more caring, to be more thoughtful, to be more mindful of the impact of their actions and their speech on others, so that we take that painful memory, the damage that has been done in our life or somebody else's life, and we take that pain and we make it work for us. We take that pain and use it to help energize something beneficial and skillful in our lives. One of the last thing to share is that comes to mind with respect to this area of conflict, whether it's inner conflict within ourselves or conflict with other people, whether it's whatever it's been based on. One of the exercises I like to teach is what I call a death rehearsal or death meditation. And it's a kind of visualization practice, and so the usual format of it is you're sitting down in meditation. You can be sitting or you can be lying down, and then the message is, okay, this is the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes, half an hour of your life, and when the bell goes at the end, then that's your last breath. So this is the last moments of your life. It's an imaginative exercise, and so this is the last moments of your life, last half hour, last 40 minutes of your life, maybe 45, maybe 50. Who knows? It's not fixed, but your life is coming to an end. When the bell goes, that's your last breath, and you got from the time that the bell rings till the sound fades to let go of everything. So during that period of half an hour or so, then I encourage people to bring 4 different things to mind. So firstly, your resentments, all those grudges, the people who've done you wrong, ex-partners, or the ones that that have hurt you, or that have betrayed you, disappointed you, either close to you in the family, or it can be political leaders or other significant people in the world, to look at those resentments. Okay, well, you've got half an hour to live. Do you still want to be carrying that person around? Again, like Luang Por Sumedho will often mention this, the chief petty officer on his ship when he was in the US Navy, who had it in for him, who gave him a particularly and deliberately bad time. He was a medic on a supply ship on the Pacific for several years, for 4 years. And the chief petty officer of his ship didn't like him and gave him a bad time. So he said, even 50 years later, I can think of his name and there's a reaction. So he would use that as something to meditate on. So all those people in your list, that horrible headmistress who treated you badly, your ex-spouses, the Ajahn who let you down or made fun of you in public, and the whole list. Say, okay, this is my list of grudges. This is my revenge list. So, do I want to be carrying them around at the end? Can I look at those grudges and let them go? So that's the first one of the 4 is resentments, grudges. The second one is regrets. Have you looking at your own life, things that you have done where you let somebody else down, where you hurt their feelings, where you were selfish or greedy or indulgent, you were deceitful or cruel, the damage that you caused, And again, to say, okay, well, you've now got 20 minutes left to go. Do you want to be carrying this around with your last breath? Can you acknowledge that we make mistakes as human beings, and can you forgive this being as well as forgiving other beings? So those are the first two. So we're down to about a quarter of an hour now. So then, appreciations. To think of all of those who have been a source of blessings in your life and benefit. Your parents, maybe your parents are in the grudge category. Usually they're in the benefit appreciation category. Your parents, your teachers, your friends, the people that you've learned from, the people you've been inspired by, the people who've helped you, who've fed you, who've supported you, and made your life valuable and rich in whatever ways. To consciously recollect those appreciations and the feeling of gratitude, not to create a sense of debt, like, oh, I don't want to die owing you, but rather the quality of gratefulness. How wonderful that I was able to have such a wonderful mother, a wonderful father, or how it was great that school teacher. He was so good and so helpful. Yeah. So those appreciations. So we're down to about 5 minutes now. And then the last one is the most challenging, which is to appreciate your own goodness, which is almost illegal in the West. In Asia, there has much more of a culture. It's called Chaganus. The Buddha calls it Chaganusati. Chaga is C with a long A, G-A. Chaga it can mean generosity, but it also means your own goodness. So to recollect your own good qualities. So the Judeo-Christian, particularly the Christian take on things is that you're not supposed to have positive thoughts about yourself. You don't, because of the fear of being inflated or conceited or proud. So that often when you grow up in the Christian society, you're encouraged to be self-critical. I'm a terrible person. I'm a sinner. I'm awful. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Like the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a poor and feeble sinner. Please have mercy, I'm a sinner. So that has its own place in contemplation, in contemplative life. But if we take that in a superficial way, it's like I'm bad, I'm stupid, I'm awful. I'm sorry. I mean, I am English by birth. And it is amazing how often when English people meet each other, they say, excuse me. Like, I'm in the way. I'm sorry. Yeah. We apologize for existing. It's a strange thing, and maybe it doesn't happen so much nowadays, but it's a very common trait. We say, I'm sorry, please excuse me. We assume we're in the way. Yeah. And so that, which I would perceive as a very English trait, is a small, crowded island. So, to recognize your own goodness. And a way of working this exercise, if somebody else had done the things that you have done with your life, you would be quite ready to congratulate them. Oh, well done, you've been really kind, really helpful, really unselfish, really thoughtful. If somebody else had done those things, you'd say, well done. Because it's me, it's like, well, it wasn't really anything, and anyone would have done that, and I only did it because I had to, and people expected it of me, and so step out of your own shoes and look at your life from outside and say, yeah. To say, yeah, that was well done. I did a good job there. Not to be inflated or conceited, not to be proud or to think of yourself as, yeah, well, actually, you're really lucky to have me around, But to be kind of inflated in a foolish way, but to give credit where it's due, as they say. Say, yeah, that was well done. Those are some good things. And that's the last of the challenges as the final moment comes. So I thought I would share those with you as a way of ending inner conflicts and external conflicts. That what do we want to be carrying around at the end? And that sense of letting go of ourselves, letting go of others, and to free the heart from those limitations, those burdens. That's the most complete and full way of resolving conflicts. So on that note, we can end things.
So my question is that there are many teachers in the world who can be a real mixture of things. They can be brilliant teachers, but they can also maybe, for example, there was that very famous Tibetan teacher, wasn't there? I can't remember his name.
Chogyam Trungpa.
Yeah, he was a brilliant teacher on one hand. On the other hand, he was an alcoholic, and there are people like that who can be brilliant and also mixed. And if we encounter those kind of teachers, should we take a very moral high ground and say that their conduct is not correct? We should reject them? Or do we take a broader view? Obviously, depending, there's different, if they're very harmful, obviously, they can be very harmful. They can also have something to offer. And obviously, here in this monastery, you have very good conduct, so you are supported by that, and not everybody else is. And that obviously, when people don't follow moral precepts, they can also cause a lot of harm and confusion and fear. So do you have anything to say about that?
That's a good question. Yeah, sometimes if you spend too much time on the moral high ground, you need oxygen up there. So it's skillful to have a very rigorous standard of sila for oneself, but then part of that, in a way, what I was saying about judgment is that sometimes people are so filled with their own rightness. They're way up on the sort of Himalayan altitude of the moral high ground. They really do need, oxygen cylinders with them, and that there can be even though the standards that they have are quite admirable, they can be actually filled with quite a lot of hatred and aversion, and also feeding that sense of their own atta, their own self-view, through blaming this person, that person, this person, that person. So the kind of approach that Luang Por Chah had was he didn't spend a lot of time finding fault in public ways or denouncing the other people around him or people who are less well behaved, but he put his attention on being part of the solution rather than just complaining about the problem. So with teachers like Chogyam Trungpa, there's many people who have been his students, like Pema Chodron, who's extremely admirable, very wise and noble being, and she's a great teacher, and her own standards of conduct are impeccable. And she still holds her Chogyam Trungpa in high regard, even though she acknowledges he drank himself to death before he was 50, and he was extremely promiscuous as well. And so that the amount of time we can spend finding fault with others is infinite. And so I think that also seeing that, well, someone like Pema Chodron can see the good side of her teacher and can focus on that, then you can't say, well, Trungpa's bad and everyone who's been his student is bad, therefore everything is bad that's connected with that. That's going too far, because I've spent time, I never met Chogyam Trungpa, but I certainly spent time with Pema Chodron, and she's a very inspiring and wise person. So I feel that in some respects, you take whatever is good from the things that you meet, and so there are words that Trungpa has said that are very inspiring, very very true, very helpful. But also, if you say therefore everything about Trungpa is good, it's going too far. So it's like Luang Por Sumedho. He was telling me a conversation he had with another well-known spiritual teacher. I think it was Firoz Mehta, who used to give. They both used to teach at the Buddhist Society Summer School, and he asked Firoz Mehta this same kind of question: "What's your opinion of Chogyam Trungpa and his teaching?" And Firoz Mehta, who's a very very thoughtful and wise and admirable teacher, he said, "Well, it's rather like being offered a beautifully delicious meal on a plate that is not clean." So that the food is delicious, but the receptacle makes you say, "I'm not quite sure if I want to eat any of this." So that was the way that Luang Por Sumedho would talk about it afterwards. Well, I feel it gets tricky is where people start to use the sort of the ultimate reality escape clause, or that sort of ultimate truth trumps everything. Maybe trump isn't the right word to use, but a few years ago it was an okay word to use. But in terms of card games, the ultimate reality trumps everything. It kind of outplays the other cards, and so that becomes a really confusing and difficult for people. So I was at a conference once with a number of Western Buddhist teachers with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and one of the teachers there had just received Dhamma transmission from his teacher, a Zen master by reputation, and he had received Dhamma transmission and then had dissociated himself from his teacher, and then at this conference he said that his teacher was a quote-unquote narcissistic psychopath. That's the polite part of the sentence. I won't repeat all of it because I'm on camera and this is being recorded, but it was more colourful than that. That was the less colourful part of the description. And he said, I have no doubt that my teacher was totally enlightened, but his behaviour was appalling. And the Dalai Lama so heard that and went into a huddle with his translator. Like, am I understanding this correctly? And then his translator, Thubten Jinpa, who was had a doctorate from Cambridge in Western philosophy, said, yes, that's what he means. And Dalai Lama said, I think your understanding of enlightenment and mine is quite different. And it was a very helpful conversation because within the bounds of Buddhist philosophy as that person had inherited it, you could have someone who's totally enlightened and have appalling behavior, where the Dalai Lama is much more akin to sort of classical Buddhist expressions of things, and what we find in the southern Buddhist world, which is like, no, those don't go together. That if there is a mind that is truly enlightened, then that would manifest as skillful behavior. In Thailand, you have a number of famous ajahns who are quite quirky or eccentric in their conduct. One of Ajahn Chah's teachers, Ajahn Tongrat, was famously unpredictable and but also regarded as an arahant. But his conduct would always be within the bounds of the monastic rule, and that that was very strictly kept, even though he's extremely eccentric and unpredictable in various ways. So that I feel that if you are reading the words of some in some Dhamma book and you find it inspiring, and then you find out that the author was alcoholic, you think, okay, well, yeah, those words are helpful within the context, but I don't think I'll be voting for this person. I don't want to sign up for any of their retreats, or that I don't particularly want to advocate that person as a great teacher. But that phrase, that says something to me. So you can't override the fact that is meaningful to you, or that speaks to you in a helpful way. So you can take the useful words from that. But the degree to which you draw close or say, therefore, I'm supportive of this person and what they do and how they do it, that's another thing altogether. So I hope that's useful. I think we can be very moralistic and be again speaking about that the Bak Bap Jaidi, the monk with the difficult speech habits, that we can be very righteous and we can have good justification. We can have a list of all the evidence that proves that we're right, and not be noticing that we're torturing ourselves. We're creating a lot of suffering for ourselves with our own rightness, and it makes us less able to be an effective agent of skillful change in the world, because we're so filled with all the wrongs that everybody else is doing that we're kind of tying ourselves up in knots. So that I feel that way of say, appreciating or being aware of the wrongdoings or the shortcomings of others, but not creating suffering within ourselves about it. That's in a way, that's one of the skillful aspects of compassion, that you are able to acknowledge the suffering of others or caused by others, but you're not creating suffering in yourself on account of that. So, any other questions? Yes, if you can wait for the microphone. Down there in the corner with the white jacket, yeah, white shirt.
I just want to ask, what is karma? I mean, sometimes I'm Chinese, I listen Chinese monk talk as well. And they always talk about past life, future life, all those things. I get very confused and conflicting.
Well, karma just means action. That's what it means. Or in Sanskrit, karma, it just means action. When people speak about that in the sort of everyday use, they tend to mean action and its results, and often they mean action from past lives that's having its effect in this life. But in its essence, karma just means action. So you just created karma by asking this question, and the result of that karma is me responding to you. So it's karma, and then the word for the result is vipaka. So it's not anything very mysterious. It's just an action based on a person's intention. That's all. I don't know if that's helpful.
Always listen to monk talk on the YouTube, and then they have those monks go talk about past life, someone being someone's daughter, then become a husband or become a father or that sort of thing. Very confused, and I get quite terrified thinking what I done wrong like past life.
Well,
and that's basically, I think in China the Buddhists always talk about. Then I don't know what my past life was.
Well, neither do I. So it's like people often ask these kind of questions, but it's and even though in the Buddhist scriptures the Buddha quite comfortably talks about past lives and future lives, and that's very say frequently spoken about, I think it's more important to base our spiritual life, our spiritual practice on our own experience. So if somebody has memories of past lives or what appear to be past lives, then it's up to them to make sense of that or make use of it. Most people don't have any memories of past lives, and so that it's more skillful then to be paying attention to the choices that we make here in the present moment. And my own teachers would emphasize that a lot. They say, yeah, Ajahn Amaro, what was I in a past life? And he would say, I don't know. He'd say, who are you in a past life though? I don't know. And quite truly, he would say that that's not something that's within his experience. But what we can know is that we are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We can think, we can remember, we can imagine. We can see how our mind works. And so that it's more helpful to see the way that we make choices, we make decisions, and they have results here within our own lifetime. So from when what you did last week or what you did when you were a child, you can remember and you can see the results of the choices that you made. So karma doesn't have to be anything more mysterious than that. What you hear on YouTube there's a big variety of things, that all kinds of Dhamma talks and other things there. So if it's confusing, I would just say switch it off, because Dhamma is not to create more confusion, but to create clarity and to help the mind to be free of suffering. So if you put more attention on what your own experience is and see, okay, well, if I act based on friendliness, on generosity, on kindness, on harmlessness, then what's the result? Oh, it means I feel comfortable, people around me are comfortable, it brings a lot of peace. Okay, if I act out of selfishness or aggression or fear or greed, what's the result? It makes me more agitated, more confused, there's more conflict. Okay, that leads in a bad direction. So you can see from your own actions, your own experience in the present lifetime, in your own life, how things work. So it's more helpful to focus just on that. The Buddha gave a really interesting teaching in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses. It's Sutta number 60. It's called the Apanaka Sutta, the incontrovertible teaching. And he says, it may be to say that here is a person who lives a good life. They are kind, they are generous, they are moral, they're honest. So a person who lives like that, they attract good people to them. They are praised by wise people in the society. They sleep easily at night. And when they come to the end of their life, they have no regrets. So he said, maybe it's the case that there is no life after this one. And even if there is no life after this one, they've made a pleasant living place for themselves here and now. And if there is a life after this one, then they've set things in place to reappear in a pleasant destination. And then be another good person who lives immorally. They are unkind, they're cruel, they're selfish, they're greedy, they're deceitful. They will attract unskillful people. They'll attract bad people to them. They will be criticized by the wise people in society. They will sleep badly at night. And at the end of their life, they will have regrets. So even if there is no life after this one, then right here and now, they've made an unpleasant living place for themselves. And if there is a life after this one, then they've set the conditions for reappearing in an unpleasant destination. So let the wise person choose for themselves how they want to act. So to me, that's a really interesting teaching. The Buddha is saying, that maybe there is no life after this one. But even if there isn't, the important thing to do is to live in a skillful way. That's what say is the best use of the life that we have. So that is I feel a very, very helpful teaching in this way, because also Buddha Dhamma doesn't require us to believe in past lives or future lives. The Buddha encourages us to go by our own experience, to be guided by our own experience, as in what's called the Kalama Sutta. He said, don't just believe what people tell you. He didn't mention watching YouTube. It didn't exist in the Buddha's time, but equivalent, he said, don't just believe what people say or what people talk about in the village or in the family or what's passed down from your parents. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's the important thing is, even if it's in that Kalama Sutta, the Buddha said, even if it's a trusted spiritual teacher, like he himself, so don't believe what I say just because I say it, but rather test things out and see for yourself what is beneficial. And so that he's almost the only spiritual teacher who said, don't believe me, the Buddha, but rather test things out and see what is beneficial for yourself. So that it's not, he's not making the religion around believing the spiritual authority to be telling the truth, but rather, okay, you hear these words, try it out and see what's valuable, what's useful for you from your own experience, and then be guided by that. Okay? Yes. Okay. Okay, Evgenia, you can go first. Yeah. Oh, there's this gentleman here with the white t-shirt, grey t-shirt. There's a switch on the side.
Switch?
Yes.
Yes. You talked about conflict generating emotions such as anger and resentment. And even people like Ajahn Amaro, with all his wisdom, experiencing those emotions and observing them. But as if we, doesn't that reflect attachment to ideas and feelings and thoughts and so on? And ultimately, if we don't have those attachments, shouldn't we not be feeling those emotions? But if somebody like Ajahn Amaro, even with all his wisdom, was still feeling them, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Well, it's like I mentioned karma and vipaka. So vipaka is the resultant karma. So if certain sort of wheels have been set in motion in years gone by, like the impact of that chief petty officer on his ship during the Korean War, more than 50 years ago, more like 60 years ago now, the effect of those wheels having been spun all those years ago, it's like they don't just stop, or that or the maybe also not just with anger, but let's say sadness. Maybe the memory of your beloved mother having passed away, something like that. So that the emotions might arise, but the issue is how the mind relates to that. So there can be a feeling of disliking or a feeling of liking, like a bitter taste or a sweet taste, but it's what the mind does with that. So that and so you get different renditions of this in different Buddhist teachings, but so out of the Thai forest tradition, it's very much the way they talk about these kind of negative emotions or afflictive emotions is that, even in an arahant, they will arise, but there's no landing place for them. Like one of the great forest ajahns, Lumpur Dun, when he was in his 90s, one of his disciples asked him, very politely, Lumpur, I hate to ask this, but do you still experience anger? He said, oh yes. He said, me damai ao, which is like it arrives, it's there, but I don't accept it. It's like the delivery van comes, but the parcel's not. Nobody signs for the parcel. So the delivery person takes the parcel away again. It's like they're not accepting it, they're not receiving it. So that emotion might take shape, but there's no imputing reality or solidity or value to it. So in the scriptures, you get a lot of dialogues between the Buddha and Mara. The subject of next week's Dhamma Talk. So in these dialogues between the Buddha and Mara, it's depicted in the form of Mara as this kind of entity, this sort of demonic, sort of like a music hall villain, almost like, ha ha ha, I'll get him this time, this kind of almost like a joke-like figure coming along to try and trick the Buddha. And it's portrayed in the scriptures in those ways, and the Buddha always says, I know you, Mara, I know you, evil one. And Mara sort of has to scurry away, and it never manages to trick the Buddha. But I feel what that's representing is those feelings of worry or greed or self-criticism arising in the mind of the Buddha, but they'd have no place to land. So like there's an incident where he's sitting in the Himalayas, and Mara comes to him and says, you've got the kind of power, you could turn the entire Himalayan mountain range into solid gold. You could do that. Go on. And then the Buddha says, I know you, Mara. It's true, I could turn the whole Himalayan mountain range into solid gold, but twice that amount would not be enough for one person's greed. So, curses, foiled again. So Mara goes scurrying off. And so that that's depicted in this kind of exchange between the Buddha and Mara as two sort of living beings talking with each other. But I feel it's also a representation of that thought arising in the Buddha's mind. I could turn all these mountains into solid gold. But then immediately there's the recognition that even as that thought takes shape, what would be the point of that? Because that wouldn't be, twice that amount would not be enough for one person's greed. Or the Buddha lying down to take a rest in the middle of the day during the hot season, and Mara comes along and says, "You're supposed to be a fully enlightened Buddha. What are you doing lying down in the middle of the day? Lazy monk. What kind of a spiritual teacher are you?" And then the Buddha says, "I know you, Mara," and says, "It's the hot season, and there's nothing unskillful whatsoever in the heat of the day to lie down mindfully on my right side, to set in mind the time for awakening, to let the mind go to sleep, and then to let it wake up again. There's nothing unskillful there at all. I know you, Mara." So, and there's many incidents like that, and I feel what it's doing is representing those say, self-critical or greedy, fearful habits that arise in the mind, but there's, like Luang Por Dun saying, there's no one receiving it. There's no place for it to land. There's no validity given to it. But those forms will arise, and so I realize that's debatable, and other people might disagree. But I feel it's a very realistic way of viewing those kind of dialogues, and so that I would say, don't be afraid of those feelings of aversion or jealousy arising, because the more mindfulness and wisdom there is, then the sooner they're caught, and there's no say, strength given to them. If you've signed for the parcel and you've already opened it and said, "Actually, do I really want to open this?" So, well, you actually signed for it, so it's yours now. So when we're less than enlightened, then that's what happens. We pick things up and we follow those. But I would say that the more that the heart is really freed from greed, hatred, and delusion, then those different feelings of fear or desire or aversion, judgment can arise. But the mind is totally capable of not making anything out of it. So it's not suppressing the emotion or turning yourself kind of numb. But rather, it's recognizing it for what it is. So, like with one of the reasons why Ajahn Chah was such a highly admired teacher was because he would accept people like that, the loud-mouthed monk, and that he could accept eccentricity, he could accept difficulty, and that and he was quite. He didn't generate it on purpose, apart from running a very, very strict routine. But he would be constantly encouraging people to use the friction that came from living with difficult people, or say being ready to accommodate things that were difficult or challenging, because that's how you develop more wisdom. It's often quoted how when Ajahn Sumedho in 1981, he went back to visit Ajahn Chah in Thailand, and Chithurst Monastery had been open for a couple of years, and it was the first time they'd seen each other since Ajahn Chah had left England in 1979. And so Ajahn Sumedho got back to Wat Pah Pong, and Luang Por said, so how's it going, Sumedho? And he said, "Oh, Luang Por, it's amazing. Yeah, Chithurst is going really well. I've never lived with such an inspiring group of monks. They're really dedicated, they're committed, they're very diligent, they're very self-disciplined, self-motivated. And the nuns community, there's 4 of them living down in this little cottage, and they work really hard at their practice, and they're an inspiring group of women. I've never lived with such a really uplifting and kind of magnificent group of practitioners." Waxing lyrically like this, thinking that Luang Por was going to say, "Oh, well done, Sumedho. I feel very happy for you." But instead, Luang Por was completely unimpressed. He said, "Well, you won't develop very much wisdom living with that lot." It is completely, indifferent to all of the kind of positive side of it. He said, I don't think he said, "I'll send you a few difficult monks to spice things up." The difficulties came along anyway. But if we push conflict and difficulty away, if we try to suppress it, then we just avoid conflict or avoid difficulty, avoid emotions. Then we can get quite good at suppressing, but then we also make things stronger. We create by pushing something away. You empower it. There's actually in here there's a little passage from the one thing that Ajahn Chah's teacher, Venerable Ajahn Mun, wrote, called The Ballad of Liberation from the Five Khandhas. It says, "Wanting what's good without stop, that's the cause of suffering. It's a great fault, the strong fear of bad. Good and bad are poisons to the mind, like foods that inflame a high fever. The Dhamma isn't clear because of our basic desire for good. Desire for good, when it's great, drags the mind into turbulent thought until the mind gets inflated with evil and all its defilements proliferate. The greater the error, the more they flourish, taking one further and further away from the genuine Dhamma." So that, that sense of fear of difficulty or fear of that challenge, you empower it by pushing it away. And that Ajahn Chah's style was to, in a sense, be open to difficulty, open to difficult people, difficult situations, difficult feelings, illness and so forth, and to be consciously using that friction as a way of waking up. In Greek mythology, the cause of the Trojan War was because there was this wedding in Mount Olympus, and they wanted the wedding to go really smoothly, and so I think it was Cadmus and Harmonia were getting married. Harmony was one of the people, was the bride getting married, and so they thought, well, it's Harmonia's marriage. We don't want anything to go wrong, so we'll make sure that Eris, the goddess of discord, is not invited. We don't invite Eris because she only causes trouble, the goddess of discord. So of course Eris found out about the wedding and thought, didn't invite me. So being the goddess of discord, then she created this golden apple, and on the apple she wrote the words, "For the most beautiful," and then rolled it into the wedding feast. So, oh look, what's this beautiful apple? Oh, for the most beautiful. So who's the most beautiful? So then that caused the beauty contest between Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena. And there was differences of opinion about who should win the contest. And then that led to the none of the gods would be the judge. They all scooted off, and then Paris was chosen as the person to judge the contest. He chose Aphrodite, and then the other two, Hera and Athene, were upset with the choice, and then that led to the whole Trojan War. So that's a mythological story, but and you can interpret it in your own various ways. If you think that beauty contests are politically incorrect, I apologize for that, but it's a Greek myth. It's from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. So, but the point being that trying to push discord away created a whole 10-year-long war when thousands and thousands of people died, and it was the cause of great conflict. So it's a myth with a message that says, don't push the discord or conflict away, don't just shut that out or try to just suppress it, because it'll only amplify it, it only makes it stronger. So I feel it's that kind of message embodied in Ajahn Chah's style, and Luang Por Sumedho very similarly followed his dear teacher very closely, that had that much more of an inclusive open quality to difficulty, to difficult emotions, to difficult situations, difficult people, and that their readiness to acknowledge conflict and difficulty, then that helps to, access the resources that can really bring it to an end. If you push it away and say, I don't want any difficulty, I don't want any kind of challenges, I want to have a nice, harmonious, tidy, completely secure environment, and anything that's difficult or problematic, is exiled. You're creating a kind of numbness in yourself, and also that very act of pushing away empowers. Like Ajahn Amaro was saying, wanting what's good without stop is like foods that inflame a high fever. It creates more difficulty, creates more tension in the system. So that I feel is we're not asking for trouble, we're not looking for conflict, we're not looking for difficulty. But if there is wisdom, then when it arises, then we're taking the friction of that to be something that helps us to awaken. So Ajahn Chah would often liken it to the way you sharpen a knife on a grindstone. That you need friction to get the edge of your blade really keen, really sharp. So if you get the angle right, you get the pressure right, then you can get a really good edge on your knife. So that's the skillful use of friction is, in a way, that the way that we use dukkha, suffering and conflict, difficulty, as a way to wake up, rather than I don't want any dukkha, any difficulty, any problems in my life. Like Ajahn Chah kind of grunting to Lumpur Sumedho, like, you won't develop any wisdom with that lot. So it's like, don't shy away from the conflicts and difficulties that we have, but rather, as we are seeking for ways to bring them to conclusion or to resolve them, use the difficulty, the painfulness or the friction that comes from it as a way of waking up. So maybe one more. If there's yes, there's. We need to mark that switch a bit better.
Is that?
Yes, very
good.
good.
Thank you. You touched on something in your talk there about like a meditative mindfulness exercise that I've come across many times about either labelling thoughts or labelling emotions, and I just wondered how you can do that without it kind of detracting from one's personality. You mentioned that about not becoming like a data-like, characterless person. And I must admit, over the years with Buddhism, that's one thing that I have struggled with, that I think, obviously this idea of who you are as a self or a person or personality or one's character, but as soon as you start, or speaking personally, as soon as I feel like I start to label thoughts, separate emotions from this concept of who I am, then I feel like I'm always running the risk of becoming less of who I am, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I've seen personally, first-hand experience, very long-term meditators, not necessarily those in the monastic community, but not wishing to name any names, but I've seen people who have managed that very well, and have Ajahn Amaro being one, obviously, who managed to keep his character and a great sense of who he was, and he maintained, as you do, a great sense of self. So how do you manage that? How do you manage to detach thoughts and emotions from the concept of who you are without becoming very data-like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's like learning how to ride a bicycle. You can't really define exactly how you learn how to find that balance, but by doing it, you fall over to the left, fall over to the right, get your feet tangled in the chain, and then suddenly you find yourself, oh my goodness, I just rode for 10 yards and didn't fall off. How did I do that? So I think my experience of it is that, we can be too mechanical about it, and we get sort of overzealous in sort of naming everything, and then we make it far too clunky, and there's a suppressiveness, and so then to recognize that I'm making this very say false and mechanical, so then sort of loosening the attention and lightening the grip. So rather like riding a bicycle, you sort of adjust this, adjust that, and then slowly you get a feel for it. So that then, as you are engaging with the world, or you're watching your mind in meditation, or talking with somebody, then you find a way of, I'm getting really, this is really exciting, or I'm enjoying this, or this is really challenging, and that way of being able to be aware of what's going on, the feeling is still there, but the heart is not entangled in it in the same way. So I like to use this phrase, unentangled participating. When we talk about being the watcher or the observer or the one who knows, sometimes it gives too much of a sense of this sort of abstracted, disconnected observer, like sort of the video camera that has no consciousness but just sort of recording the data of your life. But so that language is used quite regularly in many Dhamma talks, like the silent witness, the watcher, the observer, being that. And I feel when that's sort of grasped, or that's taken too literally or seriously, you can create this false sense of disconnection. But then that in you which realizes this is always feeling a bit clunky, or this is a bit dead, or like this is really, I'm tripping over my own feet here. That's the thing that's recognizing that is the thing to trust. Do you see what I mean? The thing that's recognizing this is clunky, rather than I'm doing my practice really well. This is the mind noting I'm doing my practice really well. The term unentangled participating is trying to embody a quality of engagement, so that the heart is attuned to the sense world and to feeling and perception and interaction, but without entanglement, without being tied up with that, without being identified with it, and so that there is the unentangled quality. There's no limitation or restriction on account of that, but there's a participating. There's not a I am the observer. This is data being received, and that because I feel that's a false abstraction, and that when people are say relating to their meditation in that way, it can often come across like, I was told to just watch, so therefore I shouldn't. The body should be completely frozen in meditation, just not move a millimeter because I'm just watching. But you can also just watch your ability to move your body. Your capacity to act is also part of the way things are. If you see what I mean. And so that's why I like the word participation, because it's not making a false separation. And I feel that's very much what the Buddha's speaking of in terms of the middle way, that with his enlightenment, he didn't just become kind of spaced out or disconnected to the world. It was like this Buddha image is the Buddha's touching the earth. That's the moment of enlightenment, when he reached out and touched the earth and invoked the earth to be his witness at the moment of enlightenment. And so that it's if that quality of enlightenment is just an inner experience of watching what's happening, and it's not connected to the body and the living world, and then it's incomplete. And so that I feel that the Buddha's response to his enlightenment was to teach and to engage mindfully with the world. He was available to connect with people and to offer his understanding to others. So that after the enlightenment, they say every word that he spoke was appropriate to the time, the place, the situation, was perfectly honest and suitable for the people he was with for the whole of the rest of his life. So there was an intense attunement to the living world, to living beings, and to people and things. The mindful use of food and clothing and shelter and so forth, so that the Buddha's detachment manifested itself in a total attunement to the way things are. So that's why I think the word participation represents that. The Buddha was, kind of quote, just watching, but what he's watching his own engagement with the living world, with his own body, with the society, with the needs of the people around him. And so that getting a feel for that middle way, that's why I like riding a bicycle or learning how to swim. It's like you can't ride a bike by reading a book about it. You've got to get on the bicycle and it's a whole body learning. So in a sense, what you're asking is it's a whole body learning. It's a whole being learning, and the middle way, it's a quality of balance. Of there's a feeling of anger, and I know there's anger. There's not an identification with it, but here it is. It's a hot feeling, and it doesn't have to be suppressed. It doesn't have to be followed. But here it is. It feels like this. Just as feeling the heat of the sun on your skin or the wetness of the rain. It feels like this. So it's if you like a living quality of balance. It's that attunement of the heart, and then recognizing where things are off, like too loose, too tight, too far to the left, too far to the right. Oh, okay, hey, I'm doing it. I'm riding the bike. Hey, look at that. And you fall off again. So that the more we practice, the more we learn how to find that middle, and then being mindful in a conversation or in a social situation or watching your mind in meditation, then you recognize that, it's too slack, too tight, too far this way, too far that way, and you get to know that middle. Just like when you're riding a bicycle, you don't think, how am I balancing? You do it by doing it. It's not a concept. It's not a verbal thing. It's an attunement of the whole being. So I hope that's useful. So I think that's enough for today. So thank you for your good attention.